All right, class. Now we're going to take a journey through the fascinating history of graphic design. Believe it or not, graphic design isn't just something that started with computers or even with the printing press. In fact, the roots of visual communication go back thousands of years. Graphic design has always been about communicating ideas through visuals, whether it's through images, symbols, or text. And by understanding where it all began, we can gain insight into how modern design developed and how it continues to shape our world today. Let's start with the earliest examples of visual communication: cave paintings. Humans have always had this innate need to express themselves through art. These cave paintings, found in places like France, Spain, Australia, and Indonesia, are among the first attempts at using images to tell a story. Imagine our ancestors drawing pictures of hunting scenes or animals on cave walls to communicate their experiences or beliefs. While we can't say for sure whether they were trying to communicate with each other or with their gods, one thing is clear: humans have always had a natural ability to use visuals to express themselves, and that's something we still see in graphic design today. Now let's fast forward to one of the most important developments in human history: written language. The Sumerians, around 3300 BCE, developed one of the first known written languages. This language wasn't like the alphabet we know today. Instead, it used symbols or icons, where each symbol represented an entire word or concept. This idea of using icons to communicate visually is something we still use in modern design. Think about the hamburger icon you see on websites or the magnifying glass that symbolizes a search function. Even in today's digital world, we're still relying on visuals to convey complex ideas quickly and efficiently. Moving forward, let's talk about China's major contributions to printing. As early as 200 CE, the Chinese were using woodblock printing to create designs on silk and later on paper. This method allowed them to stamp repeated designs, a huge leap for communication at the time. And here's something you may not know. Bi Sheng, a Chinese inventor, created the world's first movable type printing press around 1040 CE, more than 400 years before Gutenberg's famous press in Europe. China was way ahead when it came to printing technology, and their advancements laid the groundwork for the graphic design industry we know today. Let's jump to the Middle Ages, where typography began to evolve into an art form. Calligraphy wasn't just about writing, it was about making the text itself beautiful and valuable. Since books were handwritten and rare, calligraphy became a way to showcase artistry, especially in religious texts. In Islamic culture, where figurative art was often forbidden, calligraphy became one of the few ways to express creativity through design. This emphasis on beautiful, intricate text is something that still influences typography in modern graphic design. Now, how many of you are familiar with coats of arms? These emblems, which originated in Europe around the 1100s, are actually considered some of the earliest logos. During the Crusades, soldiers needed a way to identify which house or territory they came from, so they painted these symbols on their armor and flags. Much like modern logos, coats of arms were designed to represent a family's values, traits, or style. Later, these emblems served practical purposes, like acting as seals to verify authenticity. And in many ways, they set the stage for the branding and logo design we use today. Now let's talk about signage. In the late 14th century, King Richard II of England made a law requiring alehouses to hang signs outside so that people could easily find them. This was significant because it was the first time signs were used to represent businesses, not just families or houses. It's amazing to think that something as simple as a sign hanging outside of a pub became the foundation of modern advertising and brand signage. Today, the tradition continues with storefronts using signs to attract and inform customers, though the designs have certainly become more sophisticated over the centuries. We explored how visual communication started from cave paintings and evolved through different cultures and technological advancements. We're going to move into a more modern era and focus on some of the key developments that gave birth to graphic design as we know it today. This period starts with one of the most important inventions in history, the printing press. From here, we'll look at how mass communication, logos, advertisements, and even the first graphic design agencies emerged. Sound good? All right, Let's dive in. So, where did modern graphic design really begin? Well, a huge turning point was the invention of the Gutenberg press in 1439 by Johannes Gutenberg. Before this, books were copied by hand, which was extremely slow and expensive. Only the wealthy had access to books and education. But when the Gutenberg press introduced movable type to Europe, it changed everything. Suddenly, it was possible to mass produce books, pamphlets, and other written materials cheaply and efficiently. This meant that knowledge and literacy spread quickly, and people who had never had access to books before could now afford them. What's interesting for us as graphic designers is that the Gutenberg press didn't just make mass communication possible, it also paved the way for design. For the first time, printed materials needed to be both readable and visually appealing. So, we can see this as the birth of the idea that design matters when communicating to a larger audience. As printing became more widespread, something else interesting happened: the emergence of logos. Printers started using simple marks or symbols to identify their work, a bit like how we use logos today. But back then, a logo wasn't just about branding. It also reflected the printer's craftsmanship. The quality of a logo told you a lot about how well that printer could handle the rest of their work. If the logo looked crisp and clear, it meant you could expect the same quality from everything they printed. So in a way, logos started as a way for printers to show off their skills. Now let's move to the 1600s, when we start to see the first print advertisements. This is another major milestone in graphic design history. Around the 1620s, printed ads began appearing in a publication called the Coranto, which was the early version of a newspaper. These print ads were important because they weren't just about text anymore. They included images, which made them more engaging and persuasive. While advertising had existed in written form for a long time, this was the first time it was mass-produced and combined visuals with the message. So this was a key moment where design started to play a bigger role in commerce and marketing. By the 19th century, we had another big leap forward: chromolithography. Now, what's exciting about this invention is that it allowed people to print in color. Before this, most printed materials were in black and white, and the designs were pretty limited. With chromolithography, advertisers and artists could use vibrant colors to create more realistic and emotionally engaging images. It allowed businesses to create full-color posters, packaging, and ads that really grabbed attention. This opened up a new world for brands because they could now use color to represent their identity and create emotional connections with their audience. For example, companies started using color schemes to create a visual identity, just like how brands today have signature colors that we associate with them. This was a big shift in how brands communicated with consumers. All right, so now we're moving into what's known as the modern era of graphic design, which really took off in the late 1800s and early 1900s. This is when we start to see graphic design becoming more artistic and strategic. During this time, there were major technological advancements in printing, and competition between companies was driving innovation. As a result, graphic designers began exploring new styles and techniques. This wasn't just about making things look nice, it was about using design to communicate more effectively and creatively. In 1903, we see the world's first official graphic design agency, the Wiener Werkstätte. Based in Vienna, Austria, this agency was a collective of visual artists, including painters, architects, and early graphic designers. It marked the beginning of professional graphic design agencies, which would later become the standard in the industry. The Wiener Werkstätte was groundbreaking for a couple of reasons. First, it showed that graphic design could be both functional and artistic. Their style was very influential, and they played a big role in developing the Cubism movement, which broke traditional design rules and opened up new ways of thinking about art and design. Second, they set the stage for future design agencies by creating an organizational model where artists worked together collaboratively on different projects. This model would later be adopted by graphic design agencies around the world. Another huge moment in graphic design history came in 1919 with the founding of the Bauhaus in Germany. Now, Bauhaus wasn't just a design school, it was a revolutionary movement. Their goal was to bring together different forms of art, architecture, fine art, and design, into one perfect, unified creation. Bauhaus focused on simplicity and functionality. They believed that form should follow function, meaning that designs should be clean, simple, and serve a purpose. This minimalist, modernist style became hugely popular and continues to influence design today. If you've ever seen a really sleek, minimalist poster or logo, you can thank Bauhaus for that. Now, you might be wondering, when did people start using the term graphic design? Well, it wasn't until 1922 when a book designer named William Addison Dwiggins used the term in an article to describe his work. In the article, titled "New Kind of Printing Calls for New Design," Dwiggins explained that his job was to organize and manage the visuals in book design, something that hadn't really been named before. This was the first time someone described graphic design as a distinct field of work, and it helped establish graphic design as a profession. As we move forward, we can't talk about the history of graphic design without mentioning Paul Rand. He's one of the most influential designers of the 20th century, and in 1947, he published his famous book, Thoughts on Design. In this book, Rand explained his design philosophy, which focused on balancing aesthetics and functionality. He believed that a design should not only look good, but also communicate its message effectively. Some of his most famous work includes logos for brands like IBM, UPS, Westinghouse, and ABC. Rand's ideas helped shape modern corporate identity and are still widely respected in the graphic design world today. Finally, we get to the digital era, where graphic design underwent yet another transformation. With the invention of personal computers and software like Adobe Photoshop, designers were given powerful new tools to create stunning visuals. Photoshop, which was released in 1990, introduced photo manipulation to the world of graphic design, blending photography, illustration, and CGI in ways that weren't possible before. This allowed designers to experiment with images and create entirely new types of designs. And of course, the rise of the internet brought even more changes. Companies like MTV introduced the idea of flexible, changing logos that could still be instantly recognizable. This concept of adaptability became important as brands moved online and had to engage with a younger, more dynamic audience. So, there you have it. From the invention of the printing press to the digital age, graphic design has been shaped by technology, culture, and innovation, and it's constantly evolving. The history of graphic design is important because it shows us how visual communication has developed over time, and how each new tool or movement has pushed the boundaries of what's possible. As we look to the future, who knows what the next big shift in graphic design will be? One thing's for sure, you, as the next generation of designers, will have the opportunity to leave your own mark on the history of graphic design.